Major support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. And Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
This may sound pessimistic, but it's not. However, this late in one of the longest economic expansions in U.S. and Carolina's history, one tends to wonder, when will the slowdown finally manifest itself? Welcome again to the longest running and the most widely watched source of Carolina business, policy, and public affairs. I'm Chris William, and it almost feels like we are beyond late-stage economic expansion now, but breaking new ground. If we make it to June of this year and continue to expand, it will be the longest economic expansion in contemporary U.S. history. Does that necessarily mean we'll have the longest contraction in U.S. history? No, but it does bring up some questions on how it might be different this time. Our experts in just a moment will talk about this year and going forward. And later on, many call it one of the most critical economic development assets in the Carolinas. We welcome back the man who leads this effort. Please stay with us.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. Visit us at southcarolinablues.com. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. BARINGS, a leading global asset management firm dedicated to meeting the evolving investment and capital needs of its clients. Learn more at barings.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Donny Hicks from the Gaston County EDC, Karen Riordan of the Myrtle Beach Area Chamber of Commerce, and special guest Brent Cagle, Aviation Director of Charlotte Douglas International Airport.
Welcome back to our program. Donny, good to have you here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back.
Karen, welcome.
Thank you.
We'll get to you in a minute, I promise. Donny, let's start with something. So, Donny, you've been a well-respected economic developer for years here, and it seems like it's an interesting time in not just the region that you live, Charlotte, Gaston County, and Gastonia, but in the state in general. So you've got two of the largest economic development organizations. You've got what is now called the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance, used to be the Charlotte Chamber, and the North Carolina Chamber. Both CEOs are gone or leaving. So the next generation of leadership at both of those large organizations, how important is it to get it right? First question. Second one is, what is getting it right?
Sure. Great question. The Charlotte Regional Partnership and the Charlotte Chamber combined. The announcement was made late last year. We're going to turn into the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance. So that creates some critical issues to operate those two organizations while they're in flux. And so I think we've had great leadership from Ernie Riegel, from Warren Van Allen. He stepped in as a lone executive to make that happen. And he's had to make some pretty decisive moves with limited data and a short time frame. I'm also on the selection committee for the new CEO. So there's been work going on almost since the announcement to select the new CEO for this group. But we anticipate starting interviews next week with having someone in place by the end of February. I do think it's critical because you created a new organization. You sort of gave up on 100 years of the Charlotte Chamber history, even though that piece still functions. And we had a 27-year history of the partnership. So being able to combine those organizations, get the funding where it needs to be, and keeping all the current activities going is critical. So I think that CEO selection is huge.
I'm not looking to rip a scab or a Band-Aid off of this, but a lot of the criticism around the Charlotte Chamber and the regional Charlotte Regional Partnership was they were certainly separate entities, but hopefully working hand in glove. But the other thing is this growing pervasive nature of regionalism seemed to have gotten lost in some relationship. Do you get the sense that there is a real nod toward that as you're looking for the next leader, either on the search committee or as the membership in general? Do you think this idea of regionalism is going to be embraced fully and will be deployed appropriately?
I think it will be. I think there's a serious interest in the new organization for a public policy initiative that is truly regional and bringing everybody together. I think the economic development piece at the partnership, we did have a really good regional focus. We were able to cooperate on marketing and business recruitment on a very, very high level among all the counties.
Right.
But I think the next step for this organization, in their mind, is to take it to a public policy where there's more integration on transportation planning, utilities, all types of issues that probably were not addressed at a high level throughout the region in the last couple of years.
Do you think, so the North Carolina Chamber is going through something similar, and you could argue that the North Carolina Chambers, has broader sponsorship here across the state of North Carolina. How important is that to get right?
I think it's critical because they're the group that really puts all those business interests together and represents them singularly, typically in Raleigh, to the legislature. I think it allows us to come up with some kind of combined effort on taxation, business conditions, tort reform, whatever it may be. They're the group that's typically going to carry that forward. And so I think that they have to be able to find a way to do that. And I think one of the challenges for any group at that level is being able to represent all segments of North Carolina. And that's truly difficult. We have become really kind of three North Carolinas. We have wealthy urban areas like where I live in Gaston County that are suburban areas that are fairly well off. And then you have a rural section of the state that is entirely different from those two organizations that has separate needs. And so to be able to fully represent the whole state is a hard thing to do.
Change seems to be a buzzword. Karen, welcome.
Thank you.
You came from Virginia and I don't mind saying this, you won an award right before you left as a Chamber Executive of the Year in Virginia, and then you turned in your notice and you moved to Myrtle Beach. So here you have a new set of eyes, not just to the Myrtle Beach Chamber, but the Grand Strand also represents a region of diverse interests. So what's your plan? How do you bring together more than just Myrtle Beach proper? And when you look forward, how do you make sure that everyone is on board with this idea of regionalism?
Well, I think regionalism is the right word, Chris. I think I have really appreciated coming in new, first of all, having a great Carolina welcome and seeing that the business community is very entrepreneurial, very eager to be aggressive in terms of moving forward on economic development and revitalization, and of course keeping the tourism economy growing. But I think my plan is to have us working really closely together up and down that Grand Strand. It's 60 miles of coastline, but it is a lot of different municipalities, and it can, if not handled correctly, it can start to break down into territorialism. And so I think it's really important that we have a vision for how we want to present the greater Grand Strand area, to the Carolinas, to the East Coast, to the world, so that everybody can have a piece of that from Pawleys Island all the way up to North Myrtle Beach. And again, the west of the waterway is where we're seeing so much population growth in the Conway area in particular. And so again, it's about having one vision, one business message, one tourism message, and then working really closely with all of our counterparts at the local political level, but also at the business community level to make that happen.
Do you feel like you're going to be able to do that with the resources that you have as a separate chamber in Myrtle Beach, and you talk about Conway and Pawleys and Myrtle's Inlet, and even down to Georgetown?
I do.
Can you cobble that together? Will you go to the State House for funding? How does that look?
I think so, because the Myrtle Beach Area Chamber is already set up as sort of the super regional for the area. So even though we do work very closely with the North Myrtle Chamber and Georgetown Chamber and the Conway Chamber, we are imbued sort of with a different capacity because we are receiving that public taxpayer money already through ATAX and TDF monies to really be the tourism generator for the whole area. So we really are the entity that's asked to lift that tide that will help all boats. And so as a Chamber of Commerce, we share membership. We have a lot of crossover, and we do a lot of things in partnership together, but we kind of have a unique role in regard to driving the economy through tourism, which is the #1 driver for that area. So far in my first 5 months, I have seen that people want us to succeed, want us to take that leadership banner, and basically then draft off what we're able to create. So I don't see us going to the legislature for additional mechanisms in terms of revenue. We're pretty fortunate in terms of having a stable supply of revenues coming in through the taxes that are currently collected to be able to do that. It's now about, do we have the right message? Are we in the right markets? Are we telling the right story about what Myrtle Beach is today? Because I can say as a past vacationer, Myrtle Beach has really changed in the last 10 years pretty dramatically, and we don't want to be known just for the beach or for being a great golf destination. There's so much more to what we all are, and again, I'm thinking about all of that from Pawleys to North Myrtle and everything in between. So
we have about a minute before we get to our guest. Donny, when you at the top of the program, we talked a little bit about this economic expansion. This is going to be a question for both of you. How do you do some pro forma planning, knowing that most likely going to have a slowdown, but I guess what does a slowdown look like, and how do we prepare for it? So what are you talking to about your members? How are you doing it yourself?
Well, it's interesting. We have been there for 34 years. We have a 28 million square foot market. We have literally 2 buildings available for industrial use. And so a lot of things that we're working on now are building product, trying to get spec buildings built, and we've secured additional land. So that's a long 10 or 15 year play. So we're looking very, very far out past the next recession to try to set ourselves up to be able to recruit. So that's not unique to us. If you go throughout the region, you would find the same thing.
Low inventory of product?
Incredibly low inventory, historically low inventory for most of the surrounding counties in the region. So we're looking out long term and making heavy financial commitments to be ready beyond the next recession, because we're going to have to.
All right, I'm going to have to cut it short. Sure. We want to bring our guests in. Before we do that, next week, or coming up on this program, she's been here before, but certainly has a lot to talk about. The Secretary of Education in South Carolina is a respected woman named Molly Spearman. She will join us again on this program. Also coming up, Chief Executive Officer of one of the largest public utilities in this country, if not the largest, Lynn Good from Duke Energy will join us, and also the CEO of the South Carolina Ports Authority, Jim Newsom, comes back to our program as well. Charlotte Douglas International Airport, no doubt, has some bragging rights, but doesn't really have the time to boast. One of the seriously busiest airports in this country and in the globe continues to grow and foster growth right here in this region, of course. Many call it North and South Carolina's most critical economic development assets. That is a big indictment. Joining us now, Brent Cagle, Charlotte Douglas International Airport Aviation Director. Brent, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Brent, you know, since we're so close to the holidays, how are the holidays this year? I mean, what kind of employment, what kind of activity did you have going through there? What did it look like this year?
So over the holiday period, we saw an increase in traffic by about 10%, which is great. We always love to see traffic numbers coming up on the positive side. But I will say, from just a purely operational standpoint, everything went very well. Smooth operations. All of our partners did a great job, and it was a smooth holiday.
Can you know, when you talk about 10% growth, that's year over year, right?
That's right. That's right.
Do you have any idea on what the absolute number of passengers that would be?
So our busiest day was about 30,000 local passengers. That's in addition to the approximate 100,000 that we have on a day-to-day basis. So we're usually doing about 120 to 125,000 daily passengers, local and connecting. And what we were seeing was, 10% increases on that. So we're talking about 130, 140,000 passengers daily during the holiday period.
Do you feel like you've got the bandwidth as the resources of the airport are now to absorb that growth, and then how much more of a factor of growth on what you can do now?
So I think the simple answer is no, we need to grow. And anyone who's visited Charlotte Douglas in the last couple years has seen that. We added 9 new gates in July of last year. We will be expanding the terminal lobby, and our roadway construction project is still undergoing to double the curbside capacity of the terminal. We need to grow. Even if the next recession, whenever that hits, even if our traffic numbers slow down, based on the number or the level of traffic that we have today, we need additional facilities.
Yeah. Donnie, question?
Brent, somewhat selfishly, I'm interested in future flights to business destinations in Europe and potentially Asia. I think people throughout the two-state area don't really fully understand how big of an impact the airport has on our business recruitment abilities, because it's a huge separator between us and a lot of our competition.
Yeah, absolutely. The airport is an important economic engine, and it also is a big draw for companies. With the 150, 160 nonstop destinations, including international, it's important. I think in the future, the interesting thing that I've seen over the last 7 years is the proportion of connecting passengers to local passengers has really started to change. Just 7 years ago, it was 80% of our passengers were connecting. Today, it's 70%. So, and that happened not because the connecting numbers declined, but because the local numbers outgrew the connecting. And that's very important. That local traffic base drives new destinations, new carriers, and new international service.
Let me follow up quickly on that. Is that because of the population in and around the Charlotte region grew, or did people decide, you know, it's easier to drive into Charlotte and just fly from that airport?
Well, I think it's probably some of both. We are an airport for the Carolinas. We are not a North Carolina or a South Carolina airport. We are truly a hub for the Carolinas, and our main catchment area are both states. And so I think that it really truly is both. Some people will drive from Myrtle Beach maybe to come to Charlotte, but they also have great connecting opportunities from Myrtle Beach to fly in too, and we're just seeing a lot of growth in the two-state area.
Karen, sorry, go ahead.
Well, selfishly, I'm a little curious about the relationship between the business traveler and the tourist. And again, when I think of Charlotte Douglas, I think about this incredible business hub for the Carolinas. But there's got to be an interesting interplay between the business community and then, as you were just commenting on, how that affects, sort of downstream, if you will, Myrtle Beach, but also other airports throughout the Southeast and the Caribbean. So I'm curious on your thoughts on that. Yeah,
I think that we are generally perceived as a business hub for American, but the truth is we're also their largest Caribbean hub. That's still holding over from the U.S. Airways days, and we're seeing the number of sort of tourist destinations increase, both in the unique destinations, but also in the frequencies to those tourist destinations. That is combined with much better connectivity throughout the U.S. in what I'm going to call mid-tier markets, Little Rock, Arkansas, Grand Rapids, those kinds of things. And so we're seeing that connectivity out of domestic and into international, which helps for the leisure traveler.
It's important for viewers to know that we're taping this program on the 11th of January, but will air later on in the month. So I say that because I want to ask you about TSA and the government shutdown. How much of a casualty, how much of a wound does that make it for you to have to manage through?
Well, I will give the TSA, all of the agents at Charlotte Douglas, all of the credit. They are doing a great job. We honestly have seen very little impacts since the government shutdown.
Really?
Now, we are very concerned. As you said, January 11th, this is the first day that those government employees, they'll miss their paychecks. And that is very concerning. I imagine it's tough to convince people to come to work when they're not being paid, when they're thinking about how to pay their bills. And so we are concerned about what happens, after today. But the TSA has been great. They've been very professional, and our wait times have not been impacted thus far.
And you haven't seen any, I'm sorry, Brent, you haven't seen any widespread calling in sick or not showing up for work yet on the first day?
The TSA has seen some of that thus far, but not widespread. Hopefully we can avoid that, or they can avoid that. But again, like I said, today will be the first day that those employees don't get paid.
Yeah, right. Donnie?
You're also a big landowner outside of the fence, and I know you've done some land planning around the airport on some of the excess land that's not required for airport operations. What kind of development can we expect that you'll be involved in, and when do you think that'll happen?
So we do have about 2,000 acres that we would like to promote commercial development on. The first project we've already seen, it's undergoing now. It's a new Amazon high-tech distribution center right along Wilkinson Boulevard and 485. We want to see more of that. We also want to see entertainment, food and beverage, retail, office, and commercial industrial development. And right now, we have a lot of interest. And so I think right now, our biggest concern is trying to find out what the right mix is and how to line up the uses the right way.
Karen?
I'd be really interested, again, when I think about Charlotte Douglas, I think a lot about American, and that's what I flew this morning to be here with you. But talk to us about some of the really other exciting airlines that are also, really making an impact at the airport.
Yeah, it's interesting. We are definitely a primary American hub. 90-something percent, 92% of our traffic is American Airlines. But in the 7 years I've been here, every year we've seen new carriers enter the market, and that is exciting. This year we saw Volaris, a new foreign flag carrier. They're a carrier out of Mexico, add nonstop service to Guadalajara. We've also seen other carriers increase their service, both with Southwest, Frontier, Via Air, some of the others. And so it is exciting, and I think that competition will bring us access to even more markets.
You know, you talk about the growth, Brent, managing through that. One of the things that you almost said it again, U.S. Airways, American Airlines said that they've chosen Charlotte and stuck with Charlotte for so long because of the low-cost place it is for them to have their hub. Yes. As you deploy this bond money, this local dollars, the cost of operating that airport obviously is creeping up. So how do you make sure that you don't start running up against the red or yellow or cautionary cost operation part?
Well, it is a tricky balance. Clearly, one of the things that has been a hallmark to our growth in the past has been our incredibly advantageous cost. But we work very closely with American Airlines so that they understand our growth plans. They are in full support of those growth plans. And you have to remember, those new gates, while they bring new cost, they also bring new revenue potential for all of the airlines. And that's really what they look at. They're looking at the cost of the airport, but they're also weighing that against their revenue potential with the ability to serve new markets.
Donny?
And I'm also interested in something we don't hear a whole lot about, and that's cargo at the airport. What's the current status of the cargo at the airport, and do you see that as a growth opportunity for the airport?
So cargo has been growing very quickly, 10 to 12% last year we were up. Now a lot of that is driven by Amazon, but our biggest cargo carrier is actually American Airlines. We think cargo is really an exciting new frontier for us. We are not a major cargo airport, and we think that could change because we do have 50% of the nation's population is within a 2-hour flight of Charlotte Douglas. And so we do believe that cargo is really an up-and-coming opportunity for us.
I want to do just a quick follow-up. What was surprising, and I had no idea about this, was that Piedmont Triad International ships more cargo than Charlotte Douglas. I'm assuming that's because of the concentration of FedEx and other type of shippers. But so what kind of growth do you think you could post long-term that wouldn't be, and sorry, Karen, to jump in front of you, but I want to do this follow-up. How could you post that growth long-term and not start to impact your passenger traffic?
Well, so cargo operates at different hours than commercial passenger service. And so what you're really doing is those cargo carriers are coming in and using the airfield in the downtimes compared to the commercial passenger service. And so that's really good for us because the more use we have on the airfield, the lower we can keep our costs.
Okay, yeah, right. Karen, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm just really interested in another growth segment, which is international tourism. We see that as being a major driver for the Grand Strand over the next couple of years. And again, Charlotte Douglas is probably going to be a major component of that, given the hub that you already are. So can you talk a little bit about what you see happening in the international markets? You alluded to it a little bit with some of those new carriers.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. The interesting thing is, although we may be a primary business airport, with all of the international connectivity, those business trips get people to see the Carolinas, to see Charlotte, and become interested. And with the connectivity being so robust, with so many destinations, we really offer a great opportunity for international tourists to come in and be able to access really anywhere throughout the country, both in the Carolinas and throughout the United States. And so we are excited about it. We do have plans to increase our capacity for international arrivals and processing in our Customs and Border Protection area.
Yeah, you've mentioned a couple, we've got about a minute and a half left. Brent, you've mentioned a couple times the just-in-time nature of having Amazon close to the airport. And you can come clean now because they've not chosen Charlotte. Are you glad that the Carolinas didn't get Amazon?
Oh, I never say that. I'm never glad when we lose a huge economic development project.
But I'm not putting words in your mouth, not you, but we've talked to folks in Queens, and in New York, and not so happy about that because it's driven up real estate prices, and it's, of course, going to choke LaGuardia and other places like that.
Yeah, well, it certainly is change, but growth is, if you're not growing, you're shrinking. And so I would never be happy about losing an opportunity like HQ2.
In about 30 seconds, how critical is DOT in South Carolina and North Carolina as you plan long term?
Very critical. And I'll also throw in the State General Assembly. DOT.
North or South Carolina?
Both.
Both.
Both North South Carolina, Department of Transportation, Division of Aviation, strong support for airports, not only commercial service, but general aviation airports. Airports are economic engines wherever they are, and they're important to fund.
Yeah. Brent, thank you for being on the program again. Congratulations, great work at Charlotte Douglas. It's a tiger by the tail.
Thank you.
You guys are doing a great job. Thank you, Karen. Good to see you. Welcome to the Carolinas.
Thank you, Chris. I enjoyed it.
You'll do well down there. The Grand
looking
Strand's a lot
forward
of fun. Donny, nice to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being on the program. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, carolinabusinessreview.org. You can watch programs. Until next week, I'm Chris William. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review provided by the Duke Endowment, BARINGS, Grant Thornton, Sunoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.com.